the Berg Podcast. Thanks for joining me today. With me today is Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And our guest today is Ellen Gacomis.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to be with you, too.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you taking some time out of your day to be here. Would you please just give us kind of a brief introduction, a brief bio?
Sure. So my husband Ted and I moved to Chester County in the late 70s, I guess, and we built the home in Chester Springs in 1985, which is where I still am living. Came out to Chester County because of the beauty of it all and to escape what was the pressure of everywhere else, except it followed us out here. I was an educator for 40 plus years, having been an elementary school principal for 30 of those years. Wish I were still doing it. Miss the kind of community it brought, the families, the children. And that what I do now, I just finished telling Dan I'm working at the Mercantile, Life's Patina, in the village, where Ted did a lot of work and loved the village, and they have been, in turn, very kind to him. So I'm glad to be here today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
So the Yellow Springs is actually where I met Ted for the first time, was in the township building in Yellow Springs.
Wow.
So I had heard about Ted, and Ford would always talk about, E.B. Walsh and Dan Daly and Ted. And so there was a pre-bid for, the one I remember is the park, is Walnut Lane Park, but it wasn't Walnut Lane Park. This was an earlier bid. But I met, and Ford said, you're going to meet Ted. And I talked to him on the phone. We had talked lots of times, but I'd never actually met Ted. But that's where, first time I ever met him was in the township building in Yellow Springs.
Okay.
So, but the reason we wanted to talk to Ellen is we were out at a golf outing, actually, that Denny, had hosted, that Denny Howell hosted, or set up, I should say, in Ted's memory. And so we were out, it was me, I believe it was me and Tom and Ford. And were you with us?
I don't think I was. No.
Maybe Colt was there. I think Colt was
Could
there.
have been Colt.
I think it was the Bird clan, and then I got to tag along. And so we're out, and we came around a hole, and Ellen came up, and I had never met Ellen. She came up and said, "Are you Mr. Berg?" to Ford, and or maybe even to Tom. I don't remember if he said it to Tom or Ford, but she realized that it was Ford, and she just wanted to talk to Ford, about the park, about the senior park that we did in Ted's name. And as Ellen was talking to Ford, I thought about it, and we played golf, and I thought about it, and I said, Ellen would be somebody good to have on, because we talk about wanting to do projects that matter, right?
Right, yeah.
Projects that are impactful in the community. And sometimes impactful can mean Longwood, or it can mean Camp Camino, right? It can be meaning things that are for a special group or a special purpose. And sometimes there's something beyond that. And when the park plans came out, as soon as they came out, Ford walked into my office and he said, "We need to win this job." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Don't lose the job." And I was like, I got it, Ford. And so we put a bid together we felt was competitive. And we felt really safe. E.B. Walsh they drew the plan, or they were the township engineer. Mm-hmm. And so we felt, we always talk about doing jobs that in a place with people And so we felt pretty safe, but Ford at the end of it was like, we're not going to lose this job, turn it down more. And I was like, okay, Ford, we're giving the job away at this point. I said, like, there's no money to be made here. He's like, I want to do this job. And so it was ironic when Ellen came to talk to us, because she knew none of that backstory, that Ford really genuinely wanted to do this job. He said, Ted had given him a break years ago as a young kid when he started the company. Mm-hmm. And, he had come out of residential. And I think started to see E.B. Walsh plans and Dan Daly and Ted probably, we're probably in as early as 2006, that 2005, 2006 window. And Ted gave him a chance on a couple of jobs as we tried to make a jump before any of us were here, from just residential to something more than just residential. And Ted sort of saw something in Ford and took him under his wing, as I've heard he did with many people, including Denny. And Ford appreciated that and wanted to sort of do the park as a thank you to Ted. So that's sort of how Ford and Ted met all those years ago. So it was just an interesting turn. And so I reached out to Ellen and I said, would you be on the podcast? And she said, sure, I'd be on the podcast. So
wasn't quite that way.
Maybe she didn't say sure.
Not quite that way.
Maybe not sure, but we got there.
Yeah.
It wasn't as confident of a sure, but you still showed up.
Well, I showed up, yeah, and I'm thankful. And I would do anything to make Ted real as the person he was. And I regret over these last 4 years, Ted has been gone for 4 years, that I didn't seek you out as a community here at Berg, because I knew just a tiny bit of that. And probably from Dan, because Dan and I are close, and he's like one of the sons I don't have. And he said they really wanted to do that job, even if they had to underbid. But I don't think I realized to the extent it was low bid. And I was familiar with that language. I would hear it often, and especially in the township, because townships were always looking to be the low bid.
Yes.
So see the low bid. But that was Ted. And to hear he took Ford under his wing also. And I don't know how many others that are like that. It's Denny certainly was one, and Dan Daly and Neil Fisher. And it's the three of them who kind of carry things on and started the scholarship in Ted's name, mostly with Denny leading the charge for that. And Ted was very, very upset with Denny. I don't know if Denny's ever shared that or not when he left, because Denny was the intern at EBW for 4 years while he was at Drexel. And then for 10 years following college. Yes. And then he walked away and started his own business. And Ted was devastated. He was angry. He was sad. He was mad. It was just all those emotions. And I tried to, level talk with him and said, when a teacher comes to me and say they want to transfer, what haven't we talked about that we need to talk about? Why are you leaving Penwood? And I said, if it's the better for your family, if it's better for your life, if it's just a good thing, then that's what you should do by all means. And absolutely, it was the right thing for Denny. And I knew Denny when he was an intern at the company, and he was young, very young. And, I tried and I'm not sure Ted ever quite forgave him or that they ever came to terms with that.
And Denny had told me that. Denny said, when I because I didn't grow up in the area. I, like you, who moved to Chester County. I moved to Chester County. I grew up in Jersey. And when I came out here, Ford and I always said we were trying to build like when if you watch a crime show and they build like the map with the people and the ropes connect and everything.
So stringing everything together.
Stringing everything together. And whether we never did it actually, but in our heads, we were trying to visually connect all these pieces and say, how are they all related? And certainly we knew, that there was a connection between Denny and E.B. Walsh, and we knew Dan Daly and E.B. Walsh, and we knew Neil Fisher with Hankin and E.B. Walsh. And so you start to piece all these pieces together and realize the different reaches that different people have. And so I, at some point, was introduced to Denny, and I don't honestly think it was under great terms. If I remember right, like it's as we talked about on the podcast with Denny. Normally, if I have to talk to somebody, something's already gone wrong, and I have to go talk about what we either did right or wrong, or what we think wasn't right or wrong. And I don't remember what project it was. I think it might have been down in Applecross area. I think it was something with one of the paving jobs, and Denny had to get involved because of the water authority, not because it was his prints. And so that was the first time it went from being like D.L. Howe to I was dealing with Denny himself, because it wasn't for D.L. Howe. And so I tried to get from Denny, like, okay, develop a relationship with Denny. And in it, he was like, well, I was at E.B. Walsh for years, and he spoke really highly of Ted. And I was like, well, how did you end up leaving? And he was like, well, he didn't get overly into it, but he got a little bit into it, and just said, like he wanted to go out on his own. He had like this idea that there was this market that he could do. And he was talking about it in the podcast that it was, I think he had just had his first, right? He just had his son, and he went out on his own. It was a risky thing to do, but he felt like it was the right thing to do. And he said, like, a lot of people weren't happy when I did it, and he was specifically talking about Ted. But every time I ever talked to him before that, I didn't realize there was tension. And so him being there for so long, I would talk about E.B. Walsh and Ted and Dan, and he'd say nothing but positive things, just all positive things. It wasn't until Ted had already passed away before Denny actually ever said, like, well, that wasn't good. Like, there was a problem. Like, it was hostile, not hostile, but it was contentious. When he left. But the funny part is the world allows it. Like, they both exist, they coexist, and they both have solid businesses still in place. We talk to Dan all the time. We do a lot of work for Dan, and then we do a lot of work with Denny. So we don't have the same relationship, because Denny didn't really go after the township work as
Okay.
much. You know, his business model wasn't really set up to do that as much. And who knows, we didn't ask him, but that could be out of respect. You know, that could be one of those things. Sometimes when people go out and leave, start their own businesses, they could do the same thing you do, but a lot of times out of respect, they don't. And it's a sign of it, even if they never say it, is they don't go after that business. They just go after a different sector. But Denny called me. Ford called me, actually, now that I pieced this together. So the golf outing was happening, and Ford called me, and he was like, "Are we playing in Ted's golf outing?" And I was like, I heard about that a while ago. I was like, "But I didn't get anything." So I called Denny, and he was like, "Tell me we forgot to include you." And I was like, "Well, I could have been me. I could have missed it. You could have sent it to me or Dylan or Ford, and it just got caught, and we didn't see it." And he was like, "Oh, you're playing." And he said, "We didn't even have to pay." I was like, "Ford wants to. It's fine. Like we want to help." And so that's how we ended up at the golf outing. Was Ford again? Ford was like, "Ted's involved. Like we got to be involved." I was like, "Okay, all right, Ford, I'll go get it." And Ford at that point, I think that was, I forget. It wasn't overly convenient for Ford to play that day. I remember that. But I said to him like, "Hey, what do you want to do?" And he was like, "Oh, we're going to play," and we canceled something else in order to play there because he said like, "I want to be." You know, Ford doesn't forget. We always say, right, like in an uninsulting way, he's like an elephant. He doesn't forget anything. Like he just, if something happens, good or bad, he's going to remember it happened. And Ted's got a special place in his heart that he remembers what he did for him when he was young.
Oh.
Yeah. That's always a challenge, right? Well, you talked a little bit about like having to sever those relationships for like the best thing. And, like that's tough on both parties. It really is. Like, for someone to try and like acknowledge what's good in the moment for them and whoever they're already working with, but what's best for them and their family moving forward. That I'm sure that creates a lot of friction in business decisions, and it's nice that you recognize it. You know. Even if,
and with Denny, and Denny does not hold back when we're talking. He loved Ted. He did. And he said he walked out with tears in his eyes the day he walked out.
Yeah.
And only their relationship was that. And that's the other thing Ted and I talked a lot about. Because in my world, it's all based on relationships. And I believe it's true in any good business. And schools had become a business also. And when I went back to the company the week after Ted passed away, because I wanted to see all of them together, and I wanted to tell them, you've got to continue the relationship aspect that he worked so hard at. The pandemic was very difficult for him. Very, very, very difficult. But I'm so glad you guys came to the golf outing. It was a spectacular day. Yeah. It really was. 120 golfers. Wow. And the detail, I was with the whole group the Friday before. I couldn't believe the detail because at sometimes during the 6 months from January to June, I would talk to the others on the scholarship committee and say, "You heard from Denny? Is this really going to happen?" And I don't know what behind the scenes may have looked like to you all and if there were things that didn't go well, but it was a pretty oiled machine that day from my perspective. And the sky was blue and white, so Penn State was
it was a beautiful day. That was hard to come by at the point when that thing happened.
Absolutely. It was gorgeous.
Raining constantly, but it was beautiful that day. Yes. So the other funny thing you brought up there is you continue with that relationship theme with Ted, and it was really what I noticed was Ted at a couple different points pointed out to me the connections that I didn't know. Like we had done work for Ted, and I had to deal with Kristen. Okay. And we had done work for Lanchester, and for some reason I had to deal with Joe Boldes.
Oh my gosh!
And
yes.
I
okay.
did not
Got
know
it.
the two were related, just because I didn't put two and two together. I don't know that I ever knew Kristen's last name until and so I didn't. And it was Ted who was like, "You realize?" And I was like, "Oh no, I had no idea." And I think at that point it's probably the library in Downingtown, and I was dealing with Ted and Kristen, and then it was Lanchester, and I was dealing with Joe was working for us, doing some side engineering work for us. And so it's kind of amazing with the network that he built. of all these people, and they say that about everywhere, but Chester County is certainly that.
Oh yeah.
That situation where if you know one person, you probably know 30. You just don't realize you know them, and then you just have to piece it together. And I think that's the scholarship that you and Denny have set up really speaks back to what he did, because E.B. Walsh was a place where the interns did go. Like, a lot of people went there and not learned how to do this. I mean, maybe they probably did learn how to do it, but also, fine-tuned what they were doing, and then stayed or went other places. E.B. Walsh is a in my mind is a smaller firm, but it has a pretty interesting grip. You know what I mean? Like an octopus reaching into a lot of different places.
I hope it continues that way. I know Dan's working really, really hard, and it was good to see Kristen. And then following the golf outing, and a few days later, Kristen and I and one of the other girls in the company got together for lunch, and I miss them. I miss that relationship too. I don't see them often enough.
Yeah, I see Dan rarely, but I talk to him a lot.
Okay.
So I talk to him a lot. I try and get him to do things, but he's always too busy.
I know, he is. And that's what he says all the time. And I know just in West Pikeland, and I guess Dan is still township engineer for Euclid. I'm not 100% sure of that, but the township
he's
work
a lot of work at Hershey Mills Golf Course.
Oh, okay.
And that's where
I don't know that.
I see him there often.
Okay.
In a very similar capacity, but not township.
Okay.
Because it's its own entity. But we've developed a good relationship there with both the owner and with, continued with E.B. Walsh, where we come in and I guess that's one of the other things too about Ted and Dan and that whole team that I think really drew Ford to it once he got into it was they didn't look at you like you're a contractor. Like, they didn't look at like, we're the engineers, we went to college, so we're going to tell you what to do and you're going to listen. And that happens a lot of places. We deal with a lot of people who draw something and they're like, this is the way it's going to be. I'm like, okay, well, that can't happen, but we'll give it a shot, and you're going to, I don't know what's going to happen when we get there and you realize that this won't work. And Ted and Dan really always gave us the opportunity, in my experience, that they would ask our opinion. Especially with Ted, it was always once you were in, because that's the nature of low bid. But with Dan in the private sector, some stuff we've done, he'll ask you, what do you think? What would be the best option do you think? And then he'll try and take that into account as he's drawing it. And it really helps. It's the relationship we want to be in, is with people who don't just want to tell us what to do, but would like some of our input so that we have culpability. So that if it doesn't go right, well, we said, this would be an okay idea. So that's an interesting part of the relationship between E.B. Walsh and Berg as we work together too.
I didn't, unfortunately, I didn't know Ted, but it sounds like he was really relationship driven. Just sound from the people that Dan's mentioning, the people that I know, what you've already said. What was it, do you think, that was so important to him about keeping those relationships or building those relationships?
I don't really know, because we both grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and he was a good student in school, but he had a hard family life. And whether that early beginnings and, I think I appreciate so much that he was so willing to learn. And he only had an associate's degree. And I shouldn't say only, because I'm one who doesn't believe not everybody's meant to go to college for 4 years. They really aren't. They need to apprentice themselves to the best people in the business, such as Bergen, and do, learn from that. And that's what, even though Denny and Dan and Neil all had 4-year degrees, and Ted would say to me, "Are you ever going to stop going to school?" No, probably not. I love it too much. And, but he worked so hard. Ted started working at a Jewish delicatessen when he was 14 years old. He'd be late for school every morning because I would be standing in my homeroom pledging the flag, and there he'd be parking the car down the street and running up the street to get to school because he had worked the night before. And he put himself through those 2 years at Penn State, and he rarely could sit still. And that wasn't ADD in that case. It was that he just wanted to make up for time maybe he didn't have. And I think then the opportunities that came, I don't know if either of you, the name Willard Rouse means anything to you. He developed Columbia, Maryland, and the Great Valley Corporate Park. So Willard was one of the first people that took Ted under his wing. And Ted learned an enormous amount from Willard Rouse. And in fact, was on a speaking dais right after Willard at Immaculata College one evening. I can remember, it's so long ago, but I remember it. And he came home after work and he's getting dressed. And I said, well, I'm going to have dinner. He said, oh, no, can't have dinner. I'll be sick the moment I open my mouth. And that was the first time he was seemingly in that kind of role of, pretty important, speaking after Willard. And then the next person was, Bernie Hankin, who built Eagleview.
Yes.
And Ted really looked at Bernie as another father. He lost, Ted's father was an older man when Ted was born. And Bernie kind of filled that role for him. And Ted learned, again, so much from Hankin and the Hankin family and the Hankin team. And he actually saw himself as the position that Dan went to.
Okay.
But then felt his ties to EBW had become really strong at that point, and he was happy where he was, I think, with the way things were going. Yeah. So but people, and I think it's evidenced... he spent time with Habitat locally, and then those years in Honduras, he became a local hero to those children and families, and I felt for sure there'd be a little girl come home on the plane sometime, but it never happened. But he felt the need to give in any way he could, and we would be walking down the street because people say, Ellen, you know so many people. I said, I only know one sector of people, the education world kind of, which is huge. But if the two of us are on the street together, it was like, who I didn't know, he knew for sure. And he introduced me to so many, people in his world. And he was actually much more social than I. And the sense of humor was, I don't know if you saw that aspect or not, but like Dan Daly's daughter, I was giving one of the scholarships to an East Senior High School student in June, just this past year. And Lucy was also graduating, and Lucy was seated right there. And Dan was in the audience too. It never connected to me until that morning. Oh my gosh, Dan will be here too. And, I just talked really briefly. The young man who was getting the scholarship, the committee had all agreed unanimously that he deserved the first place. And but we had to bring in Ted's sense of humor. And I said, and there sits Lucy Daly. She used to come into the office when she was a very little girl and participate in the rubber band fights. And it was, and his first job was with PennDOT, of all things. And he learned a lot at PennDOT too, and that's where some of the silliness came from, though. Also, but
and you talk about like his sense of humor, and Ford and I were together at a township meeting or at a pre-bid, and this one was for Walnut Lane. This is why the Walnut Lane thing sticks in my head. And
I love Walnut Lane.
So I'm right there, right? I live in Chester Springs. I wanted to do this park. And one of the other companies is there, and they're asking Ted all ridiculous questions. And Ford and I don't really enjoy pre-bids. Like, we go because it's required, and because I want to see who's there, right? Like, who's the competition? What am I up against? Right. And it was a company out of Lancaster County, and they said they kept trying to get Ted to say what the budget was, right? Like, what's this? How much money do you have budgeted? And Ted wasn't going to say. He can't say. He's not going to say. And they said something. I don't remember what they said, but Ted said, I don't remember what the number was, but it was an absurd number. If our number was $1 million, Ted said, well, if you do it for $500,000, you'd win. And these guys went in at $500,000. Like, whatever the number he said was, that was their bid. And when they had the bid opening, I called Ford and I was like, you're not going to believe what just happened. And he was like, what? I was like, you remember we were sitting there and they kept trying to press Ted, and he was like, yeah. And I said, and Ted said some ridiculous number, and he was like, yeah, we both laughed about it. I said, they bid the number. And he was like, you're kidding me. And I was like, no, they're like 40% low for it. I don't even know. I was like, Ted almost has to throw this number out, except in that world, you can't. Like, in other words, as long as they are a responsible contractor, their stupidity is not your problem. And they have a bond to back it up. So if they can't deliver, you're just going to pull their bond anyway. But I called Ted and I was like, this is the craziest thing. You said that number and they bid the number. He was like, damn, they're a responsible bidder. And I was like, I get it, except, this is ridiculous. That's not, I don't even know if they bid that job. They just wrote down the number you bid, said and sent it back to you. And, but it was like, it was The reason I bring it up, it was a joke in a pre-bid, like in a work setting. It was a joke. They kept pressing him, so he said some ridiculous number just to get him to back off. And then so the township should really thank him because he saved them quite a bit of money by making a joke about a ridiculous number because they had to be held to it.
Well, I said to him at times, I said, you embarrassed me. He said, I don't care. And he didn't. Really.
A lot of times when you think about someone's legacy and what they've left behind, you mentioned a couple of times the folks that took Ted under their wing, and you've mentioned, both of you, several people that Ted then in turn took under his wing.
Mentees, yeah.
And it sounds like that's a big part of his legacy, the giving back. But when you talk about what you can give, usually it's your time, your talent, or your treasure, right? And it sounds like that was giving back his time and his talent was really important to him.
It indeed was, and yet everyone will remember him as a humble man too. But integrity, there was no way, and in the business there could have been lots of room for less than honest practices, I think, and it wasn't going to get by him. He just and he was professional about it, but he would always make time. And Denny's description of he'd take his glasses off and set them down, and 30 minutes later, he had learned something. They had talked about the job that they were working on. They had a little funny time, and out you'd go. But it was never too much. And he worked long, long hours. The township work is demanding for sure, and it was 24/7. But for Euclid Township, and Hanley. Did you know Hanley?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I always thought his first name was Hanley, but they were quite a team. But Walnut Lane Park, I love that park. We spend a lot of time, Holly and me.
That is great sledding, Brian.
That's my gosh.
The girls go there. That's where you go. And if you're courageous enough, you go all the way to the top, all the way to development, then you're coming all the way down. It's a long run for this area.
It's beautiful.
It's wide open. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. That's where the kids play a lot of rec soccer. That's where the girls started soccer. My girls, there we go, Tamara. There you go, soccer. My girls play a lot of soccer. So Ford's wife says I talk about soccer,
skiing and
surfing too much, and she amalgamates all of them into sports and says I just need to stop talking about S things.
Yes.
But that's where Gaia plays there. So there's a lot of soccer. And people use it for walking. There's eventually going to be baseball fields if they finish behind the township.
Nice.
There's a lot going on in the township right now with that because I was asked to join the open space committee like I know anything about this.
Well, Ted,
but they said, we just want you there because your name is Gacomis. I said, well, I'll do my best. And it's amazing work that's going on, though. The property adjacent to Walnut Lane, it's pretty cool.
You mean Anselma on the other side?
Yeah. And Anselma,
Well, isn't there an older woman that has the house right in the middle?
That's part of the discussion right
she's
now.
Right in the middle. That's
yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But when I go to the park, sometimes I'll go early Saturday mornings, especially in the fall, and we walk around, and then Holly wants to go up into the brush and everything. But to see all those little kids playing soccer, I hope he's looking down because it's a beautiful sight, especially the little peewees, you know, and the colorful, and there's
the little shirts running around. It's like chaos. It's like herding cats.
He would be so happy though to know that that's happening.
Yeah, that happened. That one. He was excited about that one when it came out. He had high hopes right out of the gate. I mean, in Ted's mind, he wanted that build all at once. He wanted the whole thing done at once.
Yeah,
and we had talked about it, and I was like, it makes sense. I was like, but I just don't think the township has accurately estimated how much this is going to cost to build the whole thing.
Yeah.
And when you talk about reach too of Ted, that's we talked about some of the people, right? But I mean, you have, you think about the reach of Hankin now. I mean, Hankin's not. I mean, they built Eagleview, and that was amazing. But they've become something. Bernie's turned that into something even bigger with Neil. And obviously Neil was with Ted, and then you got what Denny's doing. And I mean, Denny's he's everywhere right now. You almost can't go to an engineering survey firm and not run into Denny. He's just. He's filled a big void, and his impact locally on township and on the water board. And you start to think about all these people that worked with Ted over the years, and their impact on Ted. Because that's when we were at the golf outing, and the people were there. The number of people I met that I have talked to and interacted with, but never met. And a lot of them, like Dan Daly, because they're busy, you don't see them. Like I'll talk to them, we'll work together, we'll interact, but I don't see them. But when that showed up for Ted, a lot of people showed up because they, they were just like, okay, I should be there.
And there were many people that day that said, I hope we'll do this again next year. And originally, Denny had thought of another beneficiary of the golf outing, which was fine with me, fine. As long as we can, we're not going to keep the scholarship going forever.
Maybe.
If we can. But everybody seemed to have a really good time, and they were glad to be there for the reason and all. It was great. There was a one of my former school families. I would look at the carts and the name on the carts, and that's how I saw you all. And but this man said, "You were my kid's principal." All right, I knew the moms more than I knew the dads. I'm sorry, but it was awesome, and that's to continue to build again the relationships. But I have to say, like Denny has a marketing group now or firm or something with them, and meeting all those people is like, wow.
Yeah, Denny is one of those things, and this is it's, for me, there's similarity in talking about Ted and talking about Denny, because they are very different, but Denny learned, refined what he was doing with Ted, and has said that many times to me. But Denny and himself, what he's doing is kind of crazy right now. I mean, he's Ford likes to be in a lot of things. Denny's going to try and go more, I think. The two of them together in a room could be real dangerous. You wouldn't want to leave them together too long. Who knows what they would try and do. But you talk to Denny and you see why he had to leave. It's just there was so much more in play for Denny in terms of what he wanted to do, and I think he probably knew it. I don't think he knew what he would do, but you could see he had aspirations to be something, and he had to go out on his own to do it and risk it and either make it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I know even now he says, Ted gave him the foundation to really be able to be confident and go do that. So.
And he's very open about that. He really is. I appreciate that, and I'm so glad that for Denny and Dan and Neil, or Dan and Neil are the quieter ones. Yeah. But I'm so thankful. And we went first to Penn State because, of course, we would have loved to have the scholarship there. But when they said it needed $250,000 to start it, we thought, no. Yeah. And now I'm just as glad it's local. And the kids I've met through the scholarship, it's just wonderful. And it's interesting to see, too, in the essays that they write, they understand the civil engineering aspect, but they're smart about the future and what it means for the environment and local communities and bigger communities also. And they are writing their essays how the civil engineering will be one aspect of there. So, I hope that's what he's left us to.
Yeah. Well, and I guess we should say we've danced around it, but what is the idea behind the scholarship?
Okay.
So in terms of who gets it, and that sort of thing, because we've talked about it, but we haven't actually said it. So
it has to be a senior in Chester County, a senior in high school, that will declare their major as civil engineering. And the young lady who won the first year, she was from Downingtown STEM. Excuse me, she was from STEM. Yeah. And oh gosh, that was so interesting because when they told me the date of the awards assembly, I had no idea all this was going to come together and everything. And so, my goodness, I'll be in Greece. The one thing Ted and I never got to do was go to Greece. And my nephew, our traveling buddy, the two of us were going to Greece. And instead, I got to meet this young woman one-on-one instead of in a big assembly. And she had done her homework and she had read a lot about Ted and what he had done in addition to being a civil engineer, and she is with Denny's firm as the intern, and awesome, really, really awesome. So it's I hope we can carry the scholarship on. Yeah, so. And there were 7 applicants this year, which was the most so far, and not. The East High School was one, and I'm hoping there's going to be one from Ruston High School because that was our feeder pattern from my school soon. But why did I go down that road? So this year, yeah, there were 7 applicants, and we were unanimous on the first one. And the second one we were split on. And so I called Kevin at the foundation, and I said we were scheduled to do 2 $2,500 scholarships, which isn't a lot of money, but it's something, and it's something more that a kiddo wouldn't have maybe. And I said, could we do 3 and just add 1,000? He said, and lessen the amount that you were going to give 3 2s instead of 2 2,500s. And he said, we can't do that. And so I can just say the Chester County Community Foundation is an awesome group to work with as well. They have been phenomenal. So I'm looking through my notes and everything, and I thought, wait a minute, Denny only voted for one person. And I called Denny, and he said, oh, I'll look through my notes. And he called back, and he said, well, I want so-and-so, which made the difference. Because there were 3 of us, and we needed a 4th person to say, yeah, I'll go with that one too. So works in mysterious ways. So it's been a great experience. And the other young man was from Coatesville this year, and the $2,500 will mean a whole lot to him. So even though he has a full ride to Shippensburg and plays soccer.
Okay.
Nice.
So
Very cool. Well, that's probably a fair place to wrap it up. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and sharing some of your stories and thoughts, and helping to honor the legacy that is Ted. So
thank you for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Brian.
Folks, thanks for joining us today. We hope you got something from this episode, and we hope you come back again.